on screen for graphics cards. Our last game is Crysis 3. Just like Far Cry 3, it scaled well from 1 to 2 GPUs, but we see the same issue with great average frame rate scaling and poor minimum frame rate scaling that translates to uneven, lurchy animations. In the case of Crysis 3, it was actually noticeably worse than Far Cry 3 with 3-way and 4-way SLI. So much so that as a gamer, I would much rather play with 2 graphics cards at lower detail settings than with more graphics cards and game settings cranked. Speaking of in-game settings, if you want to see how I was running everything, check out the download link in the video description. GPU boost clock speed was another interesting part of the story. With 2 GPUs, we saw slightly lower turbo speed because we hit our thermal limit sooner on the top card than the bottom one because it has less access to fresh air. Surprisingly though, we reached the same GPU speed even in the other configurations. Pretty impressive when they're all packed in like sardines in a 4-way config. Speaking of impressive, power consumption. I mentioned before, I threw a 1500 watt, 80 plus titanium CPU in this rig to ensure that I wouldn't be limited. The fan on it barely even turned on. Our 4-way SLI configuration drew 620 watts from the wall in our stare at the fire test in Far Cry 3. That means that even accounting for another 50% capacity for future expansion, a 1000 watt power supply would have been plenty for this rig. So it's back on the bench. All right, now back up a second, lads. We run in here, throw a bunch of graphs in our faces for 5 minutes, and then basically voiceover telling us to ignore the performance numbers because they don't reflect the gameplay experience. What gives? Great question. Normally, when we do benchmarks on this channel, it's okay to use fraps to take average frame rates and compare graphics cards' relative performance.
Alright, that sucked.